Chapter 10 The Great Conquests. The main concept that will drive this chapter in the story of everything is the theory of evolution. And remember, theory does not mean a guess. In fact, in all of science, evolution is probably one of the most tested, utilized, and accepted ideas because with every advancement in technology, we get new evidence supporting it. For example, we find a lot of fossil evidence exactly in the layers of the Earth that we predict. DNA testing gives us immense amounts of data about common ancestors of species. And lastly, we can literally see evolution happening through the discovery of new species right after a drastic change in their environment. So bottom line, if anyone says evolution is not real, they are simply wrong. Now, since that's clear, what exactly is evolution? Well, Charles Darwin, in the 1800s, first proposed this idea of evolution by natural selection. After travelling the world and studying its wildlife, he developed this idea for over 2 decades, and finally explained it in his book On the Origin of Species in 1859. For the first time ever, it provided an explanation for how a simple but elegant law of nature could create so many animals that were perfectly adapted to their environment. He observed, like we mentioned before, all species have a tendency of overbreeding, which inevitably puts a strain on the natural resources needed to not die. When this happens, only the best equipped to extract energy would survive and thus pass its genetic traits onto the next generation. The rest would die, hence evolution by natural selection. A common misconception is the phrase survival of the fittest. Fittest very often implies physical strength and aggressiveness, but in reality, it can mean anything from the best camouflaged, the cleverest, or even the most cooperative. In fact, the phrase became popular only because of its ability to offer a scientific explanation for racism. Survival of the fittest was neither introduced by Darwin, nor does it accurately represent his ideas at all. It was unsurprisingly coined by Herbert Spencer, the father of social Darwinism. Spencer attempted to apply the blind and harsh law of nature to human social orders. The faults in this thinking could not have been more perfectly exemplified in the rise and fall of the Nazi regime. Basically, evolution by natural selection does not equal to survival of the fittest. There is a lot more to natural selection than we attribute to it in colloquial language. Moving on. Remember the eukaryotes? After they started working together to create multicellular organisms, complex life was finally allowed to evolve in a much more flexible manner. Much like the oxygen holocaust, there have been 5 other mass extinctions. These are incredibly important because they catalyzed evolution to happen at a much faster pace. See, in the wild, species compete in niches. Areas that require special abilities to extract energy and reproduce. So when niches are full, evolution slows down and abilities get fine-tuned. But when niches are empty, the surviving species have less competition, allowing new abilities to emerge faster to fill up the empty space. This is also known as adaptive radiation. In other words, whenever there is a mass extinction, adaptive radiation triggers evolution to happen very quickly. After the drastic increase in oxygen in the atmosphere by the cyanobacteria, the planet was sent into a series of snowball Earths. And when Earth's atmosphere finally stabilized around 500 million years ago, the adaptive radiation took over and we had the first major influx of biodiversity the planet had ever seen. This incident is known as the Cambrian explosion. The first complex Pokemon-looking creatures, like the trilobites, took over the planet and survived for hundreds of millions of years. In perspective, we modern human beings have not even survived for more than 500,000 years. At this point, life had taken over the seas, but land was mostly barren. Slowly, as the first life in the form of sea plants started moving inland, extinction. A sudden period of freezing, followed by major heating, killed off many warm water and cold water species. This freed up most niches and incentivized life to move onto the land. The plants led the way, followed by arthropods, organisms with skeletons on the outside and the ancestors of today's insects. These creatures took advantage of the excess oxygen and became huge. Yes, there was a time when giant insects ruled the planet. Around 400 million years ago, plants were small, like short bushes. But some evolved to create a hard substance that allowed them to grow taller so they could stay competitive to get sunlight in their niche. They had just invented wood. Also, about this time, the first vertebrates, or organisms with the skeleton on the inside, first came onto land. However, since their skin could not retain water for long periods of time, they remained close to the coastline. Thus emerged the first amphibians. Then, extinction. Some say it was nutrient pollution, some say volcano, and some say all of the above. We're not sure what exactly happened here, but we clearly see a drying up of species from the fossil record. Fast forward 100 million years or so, the adaptive radiation incentivized amphibians to move more inland. As a result, some evolved to have less porous skin to retain water and started laying hard-shelled eggs to avoid returning to the coast to reproduce. Thus emerged the first reptiles. Soon, due to slight warming of the planet, many forests dried out, creating massive deserts. Here, reptiles thrived as competition weakened. However, this is also when the first mammals evolved, the synapsids, the ancestors of you, me, elephants, dogs, cats, and all the others. But then, the largest catastrophe the world had ever seen happened: the Great Dying. This is the single largest extinction event of the last 500 million years. Approximately 90% of all marine life and 70% of terrestrial life perished. We're again not sure what exactly caused this, but some argue it was because of a supervolcano that erupted in modern-day Siberia. The adaptive radiation that preceded this extinction event triggered the evolution of the first early dinosaurs. But within the next 100 million years, another unknown extinction event allowed the dinosaurs to conquer the planet. They ruled the planet for so long that, on a timeline, a T-Rex is closer to us humans than a live Stegosaurus. But then, around 70 million years ago, a massive asteroid struck the Yucatan Peninsula and ended the reign of the dinosaurs. These 5 extinction events are widely accepted in the scientific community, and many agree the 6th major extinction is currently underway. This started when we Homo sapiens began to move out of Africa, killing off many major species in every part we moved into. Our exploitation of natural resources has increased the rate of killing so high that many biologists fear we could lose about 50% of all living species by the end of the century. It's important to understand that life is intertwined in unimaginable ways. For example, if the toxification of oceans continues, the death of marine photosynthesizers could increase global warming at an unprecedented speed. Best case estimates for this century is to keep the increase of global temperatures below 2 degrees Celsius. But this too could cause death of up to 33% of all species, water shortages and major food price increases. At a 4 degrees Celsius increase, which some say could happen within our century as well, it may release pockets of methane gas trapped in the frozen ocean floors, and could cause a runaway greenhouse effect that no amount of energy moderation could solve. Pessimists think that a 6-degree increase is also not out of the realm of possibility for this century. At this rate, we're looking at an extinction event comparable to the Great Dying. Today, everything's not lost. We've been blessed by the ability to reflect and change our behaviour, and must do so if we want to avoid repeating the mistakes of the past. And, as much as it pains us to say, we still need to convince people with the power to make a change on the very existence of this issue.